Hello everyone, this is Anthony Chan. I'm delighted to welcome you to my Essential Medical Liver Pathology lecture series. This series is tailored for residents in training and general pathologists, aiming to provide a fundamental understanding of liver pathology and equip you with the skills to interpret liver biopsy effectively in your daily practice. Throughout this lecture series, I focus on providing a general approach to the most common forms of liver disease rather than attempting to comprehensively cover every disease entity. Despite this focus, the entire series spans over 300 pages of PowerPoint slides. To keep each lecture engaging and manageable, each lecture is designed to last around 15 minutes. Thank you for joining me on this educational journey. In this lecture series, we'll begin by examining the normal microscopic structure of the liver. Recognizing these histological landmarks is essential for identifying pathological changes. And then we'll discuss how to handle a liver biopsy. When clinicians send liver biopsies to our laboratory, it is crucial to follow best practices for preserving and preparing the specimens to ensure high diagnostic quality. Once the histological slides are prepared, we must identify individual pathological changes under the microscope and understand their probable causes. Finally, we'll integrate different pathological changes into distinct histological patterns. These patterns, correlated with clinical and laboratory information, enable us to provide useful diagnosis for our clinicians. This lecture series includes simplified Chinese translations, as the material has been adapted from some of my visiting lectures in mainland China. I hope these will not be an inconvenience. Without further delay, let's start our journey into liver pathology. Central veins and portal tracts are important histological landmarks of the liver. The arrangement of these structures provides a framework for understanding liver architecture. This histological photo shows two central veins and their adjacent portal tracts. They are evenly distributed, which indicates a preserved hepatic architecture. This is a high magnification of a central vein, also known as a terminal hepatic venule. This is a high magnification of a portal tract. A portal tract usually contains three structures: the hepatic artery, portal vein, and bile duct, collectively known as the portal triad. These structures are embedded in fibrous connective tissue within the portal tract. Not all portal tracts contain all three components of the portal triad. Simply speaking, about 10% of portal tracts do not have either a bile duct or a hepatic artery. In over 90% of portal tracts, the hepatic artery is indeed accompanied by an interlobular bile duct of similar size within a distance of about 2 to 3 times the diameter of the hepatic artery itself. This close spatial relationship, often referred to as the parallelism of hepatic arteries and bile ducts, is a characteristic feature of the normal liver anatomy. Deviations from this parallelism, which means the absence of bile ducts in proximity to hepatic arteries, have diagnostic implications in assessing ductopenia, which will be further explained later in our lecture series. In between a central vein and its surrounding portal tracts, the hepatocytes arrange in plates or trabeculae of 1 to 2 cells thick, surrounded by an intact reticulin framework. In between the plates of hepatocytes, there are sinusoids connecting the central vein with the portal vein and hepatic artery. To better visualize and easily understand the relationship of the liver microanatomy, a lobular architecture was proposed by Francis Kiernan in 1833. It consists of a central vein surrounded by plates of hepatocytes extending towards portal tracts at the lobose corners. This hexagonal structure is divided into 3 regions: the centrilobular region around the central vein, the periportal region around portal tracts, and the midlobular region in between. Pathologists commonly use this terminology to describe pathological changes in the liver. Another acinar structure was proposed by Rappaport in 1954. It consists of a berry-shaped unit with a central axis formed by the terminal branches of a portal vein, a hepatic artery, and an interlobular bile duct. Blood from these branches drains into hepatic sinusoids, eventually reaching central veins at the acinus periphery. The acinus is divided into 3 zones, zones 1, 2, and 3, based on their proximity to these vessels, exhibiting differences in tissue oxygenation, metabolic activity, and enzyme distribution. This concept elucidates why certain liver injuries exhibit a zonal predilection. For instance, portal central and portal-portal bridging necrosis or fibrosis are indicative of extensive zone 3 and zone 1 necrosis or fibrosis, respectively. distinguishing between the portal tract and central vein is not always straightforward and can pose challenges in cases of ductopenia, particularly in chronic rejection where hepatic arteries are also lost. It is also difficult in severe alcoholic hepatitis and paracetamol overdose with perivenular confluent necrosis accompanied by a ductular reaction. The typical zonal architecture of the liver can be disrupted in these conditions. Here are some aids for orienting the perivenular region histologically for challenging cases. Lipofuscin is a pigment that accumulates in cells as a result of lipid peroxidation and aging. In liver histology, lipofuscin granules are often more prominent in perivenular hepatocytes compared to other regions. This can be visualized using routine H and E staining and is even more apparent with PA-SD staining. Glutamine synthetase is an enzyme involved in ammonia detoxification, and its expression is typically increased in perivenular hepatocytes. Immunohistochemical staining for glutamine synthetase can highlight the perivenular region. Effective handling and processing of liver tissue are essential initial stages for the histological evaluation of hepatic diseases. A comprehensive grasp of the applications and limitations of commonly used histochemical stains in liver pathology is crucial for the precise interpretation of morphological findings. Liver biopsy samples are typically obtained through different common routes: percutaneous, transjugular, endoscopic ultrasound EUS, and wedge. Percutaneous liver biopsy, often performed with or without imaging guidance, is the most commonly used method. Transjugular liver biopsy is preferred for patients with significant coagulopathy or high-volume acidic fluid related to cirrhosis or other conditions. Tissue cores obtained via the transjugular route may be thinner and more fragmented compared to percutaneous biopsies. EUS-guided liver biopsy has gained momentum in recent years, especially with the availability of newer needle designs. Its diagnostic adequacy and overall adverse events are similar to those of percutaneous liver biopsy. Intraoperatively obtained wedge biopsies offer a valuable means of assessing focal hepatic lesions located over and just beneath the hepatic capsule. However, liver tissue obtained through wedge biopsy may be suboptimal for evaluating medical liver diseases due to factors such as thick fibrous tissue in the subcapsular region, artifactual surgical hepatitis, and cauterization effects. Effective evaluation of non-neoplastic liver disease relies on clinical pathological correlation. It's imperative to ensure that crucial clinical information and laboratory results are adequately communicated. A well-designed request form is strongly recommended to facilitate this process. The standard fixative for liver biopsies is typically 10% neutral buffered formalin. This solution enables the subsequent application of most histochemical, immunohistochemical, and some molecular investigations. Prompt fixation is essential to ensure good preservation and optimal histologic preparation. For a core needle liver biopsy, adequate fixation requires at least 2 to 4 hours. Placing fresh liver biopsy tissue on dry blotting paper or gauze is not recommended as it leads to significant drying and autolytic artifacts. Similarly, submitting liver biopsy tissue in normal saline should be avoided as it results in artifactual cell disintegration. Indeed, a liver biopsy provides only a minute fraction of the adult liver, typically ranging from 1/50,000 to 1/100,000 of the entire organ. Despite its small size, this tissue sample can yield valuable insights into liver pathology and aid in the diagnosis and management of various hepatic diseases. Traditionally, a liver biopsy core measuring 1 to 1.5 cm in length with 4 to 6 portal tracts was considered sufficient for assessing medical liver diseases. However, current consensus suggests that a longer core biopsy, at least 2 cm in length and containing at least 11 portal tracts, is more appropriate for thorough evaluation. This criteria is adopted by AASLD, APASL, and the Royal College of Pathologists. Inadequate sampling may result in underestimation of both the necroinflammatory activity and the degree of fibrosis in liver diseases. A set of stains, often referred to as a liver panel, is commonly used to evaluate non-neoplastic liver diseases. While there is no standardized recommendation for stains in liver biopsies, a minimal evaluation typically involves 2 to 3 levels of H and E staining. Additionally, the minimally essential panel usually includes stains for connective tissue, reticulin framework, iron and copper deposition, as well as periodic acid shift with diastase PSD. PASD staining is employed to illuminate cytoplasmic globules within periportal hepatocytes, suggestive of alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. It also highlights Kupffer cells containing ceroid, indicative of recent lobular activity. Moreover, it reveals the presence of fungal elements within the liver tissue. PAS stain's role in liver biopsy assessment is relatively restricted and not always part of routine testing. While it highlights glycogen content in hepatocytes, glycogen's high solubility can lead to inconsistent staining outcomes. Nevertheless, additionally, it may assist in detecting microorganisms like Entamoeba histolytica. This PASD stain shows numerous alpha-1 antitrypsin cytoplasmic globules. Residual glycogen in hepatocytes, resulting from incomplete diastase digestion, might resemble alpha-1 antitrypsin cytoplasmic globules. However, residual glycogen typically appears granular rather than globular in morphology. This PASD stain reveals few ceroid-laden Kupffer cells. Ceroid denotes an early-stage form of lipofuscin, resulting from the breakdown of engulfed necroinflammatory debris. Its presence indicates recent active liver injury. Masson's trichrome stain is a widely used connective tissue stain in liver pathology. Its primary objective is to highlight type 1 collagen, typically appearing greenish or bluish in color. This staining helps identify normal structures such as portal tracts and terminal hepatic venules, evaluate hepatic architecture, assess fibrosis severity, and distinguish between necrosis and fibrosis. In cases of necrosis, a well-executed trichrome stain may reveal a distinct two-tone appearance, with darker staining in residual normal structures and lighter staining in necrotic regions. Additional applications include highlighting Mallory-Denk bodies appearing red, giant mitochondria also red, and amyloidosis pale homogeneous green-blue. Sirius red is another connective tissue stain that offers an alternative to trichrome stains for highlighting type 1 collagen. It is particularly recommended for morphometric quantification of fibrosis due to its highly detailed and contrasted staining. Sirius red is also more sensitive in detecting mild pericellular fibrosis. I personally prefer Sirius red over trichrome. The reticulin stain plays a crucial role in identifying type 3 collagen reticulin fibers, which is essential for evaluating hepatocyte core thickness, the integrity of the reticulin framework, and the presence of any nodular architecture in liver tissue. In certain centers, the reticulin stain is the sole connective tissue stain routinely used in liver biopsy. This is because it not only highlights type 3 collagen, but can also reveal type 1 collagen, similar to how trichrome or Sirius red stains are used to assess fibrosis. This trichrome stain confirms the cirrhotic status by showing multiple regenerative nodules are surrounded by fibrous septa. This Sirius red stain shows portal and periportal fibrosis. Similarly, portal and periportal fibrosis can be also visualized in the reticulin stain. The reticulin stain is particularly useful in identifying areas of parenchymal collapse, as it highlights the condensation of the reticulin framework in these regions. This characteristic may not be easily observed in H and E sections, making the reticulin stain a valuable tool for detecting subtle parenchymal collapse that might otherwise be missed. Furthermore, the reticulin stain is helpful in distinguishing between bridging necrosis and bridging fibrosis. In cases of bridging necrosis, the stain reveals the condensation of residual, loosely aggregated reticulin fibers, whereas this feature is absent in bridging fibrosis. Pearl stain, also known as Pearl's Prussian blue stain, is effective for detecting iron deposition in the liver, allowing for the evaluation of both the distribution and extent of iron overload. The liver stores iron in two forms, hemosiderin and ferritin. Hemosiderin is stained intensely by Pearl stain, whereas ferritin is only faintly stained. It's important to avoid overinterpreting the faint staining of ferritin, as this protein is an acute phase reactant and can appear in various active inflammatory conditions that are not related to iron overload. Pearl stain shows diffuse iron in the cytoplasm of hepatocytes with a pericanalicular pattern. Oursine stain and its alternative Victoria blue stain are effective for highlighting the cytoplasmic hepatitis B surface antigen. Additionally, these stains can indirectly identify copper by staining copper-associated proteins like metallothionein. They are considered superior to direct copper stains, such as rhodanine and rubinic acid, because copper is highly soluble and can be lost in poorly buffered formalin. Besides their use in detecting hepatitis B surface antigen and copper-associated proteins, oursine stain are also valuable for highlighting elastic fibers. These fibers are present in normal fibrous tissue, such as in large portal tracts and well-established fibrotic tissue. This oursine stain shows prominent deposition of copper-associated protein in periportal hepatocytes. Numerous hepatitis B surface antigen-containing hepatocytes are highlighted in this Orsin stain. Certainly, these cytoplasmic inclusions can be also demonstrated by immunohistochemistry. Thank you for staying with me for this lecture. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.